I've never been able to fully process what happened that night, but maybe sharing it will help. This was last year, and to this day, I still can't explain what I saw. I, 19F at the time, was babysitting for a family I'd worked with a few times before. They lived in an old Victorian-style house on the outskirts of town. Beautiful, but the kind of place that felt eerie once the sun went down. The parents were heading to a charity gala, so I was watching their 2 kids, Lily 5 and Ben 8. The night started out fine. We played board games, made popcorn, and I let them watch a movie before bed. Around 9:00 p.m., I tucked them in, double-checked the doors and windows, and settled in the living room to watch TV. That's when things started to feel off. About 20 minutes later, I heard what sounded like faint footsteps upstairs. At first, I brushed it off. It's an old house, I thought. Probably just the wood settling. But then I heard it again. Clear, deliberate steps coming from the hallway. "Ben?" I called, assuming one of the kids had gotten out of bed. No response. I grabbed my phone and went upstairs to check. Both kids were sound asleep in their rooms, but as I was walking back toward the staircase, I heard it again. This time the sound came from the attic. Now, I'd been in this house before, and knew the attic door was in the upstairs hallway. The family used it for storage, so I'd never thought much about it. But standing there in the dim light, looking at that door, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. I was about to head back downstairs when I heard something that stopped me cold. A soft giggle, faint but unmistakable, coming from behind the attic door. My blood ran cold. I knew the kids were asleep, and there was no way anyone else should have been in the house. Against my better judgment, I inched toward the door and turned the knob. It was locked. Before I could react, there was a loud bang on the other side of the door, as if someone, or something, had slammed against it. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. Panicked, I ran downstairs, grabbed a kitchen knife, and called the parents. While I was on the phone, I heard footsteps again, this time descending the attic stairs. But when I turned to look, the attic door was wide open, swinging slightly. The parents rushed home, and the dad checked the attic. Nothing was there. No one, no signs of forced entry. Nothing. They brushed it off as my imagination, but I know what I heard. I quit babysitting after that. No amount of money is worth experiencing something like that again. Has anyone else experienced something similar? I need to know I'm not crazy. I wasn't even supposed to be babysitting that night. A friend of mine had double booked herself and begged me to cover her shift. She promised it'd be easy, just a toddler who'd already be asleep. Reluctantly, I agreed. The house was in a new development on the edge of town. It was huge, practically a mansion, and oddly isolated, with no other houses nearby. When I arrived, the parents greeted me quickly, handed me a list of emergency numbers, and rushed out the door. They barely gave me a chance to meet Ellie, their 2-year-old, before leaving. Ellie was already asleep when I checked on her. She looked peaceful in her crib, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. I made myself comfortable in the living room and started scrolling on my phone. About an hour later, the baby monitor crackled to life. At first I thought it was static, but then I heard a soft voice. It wasn't Ellie. It was an adult, whispering something I couldn't make out. Chills ran down my spine. I stared at the monitor screen, but the room was empty except for Ellie in her crib. I figured the monitor must have picked up a signal from a neighbor or something. Shaking it off, I turned the volume down and tried to focus on my phone again. Minutes later, I heard a thud. This time it wasn't from the monitor, it came from upstairs. I froze, listening. Another thud followed, then the faint sound of footsteps. Gripping my phone, I tiptoed to the bottom of the staircase. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer. I crept upstairs, my heart pounding. The hallway was dark, and Ellie's room was at the end. As I approached her door, I noticed it was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see inside. Ellie was standing in her crib, staring at the wall. Her teddy bear was on the floor, and she was whispering something under her breath. "Ellie," I said softly, stepping into the room. She didn't turn around. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "He doesn't like you here." I froze. "Who doesn't like me here?" She finally turned to face me, her little eyes wide with fear. "The man in the closet." Every hair on my body stood on end. Slowly, I turned toward the closet door. It was closed, but I swear I saw the handle twitch. I grabbed Ellie, ran downstairs, and locked us in the bathroom. I called the parents and the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. When the police arrived, they searched the house and found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No one hiding in the closet. Nothing. The parents dismissed Ellie's words as a child's imagination, but I know what I heard. I quit babysitting after that night. Sometimes late at night, I still hear her little voice in my head. "He doesn't like you here." A few months ago, I, 20F, took a babysitting gig for a couple I didn't know very well. They were friends of a coworker who swore they were super nice. The job was for one night, and they offered to pay double my usual rate, which sounded too good to pass up. When I arrived, the house was pristine, almost too perfect. Everything looked like it was straight out of a catalog. The spotless white furniture, the immaculate kitchen, and even their toddler's room seemed staged, like no one actually lived there. Their daughter, Mia, was a quiet 2-year-old who barely reacted when I introduced myself. She clung to her mom's leg and avoided eye contact. The mom, Lauren, was overly enthusiastic about me being there. She kept saying how hard it was to find the right babysitter. Her husband, Peter, didn't say much, but the way he watched me made me uncomfortable. His eyes were intense, like he was sizing me up. Before they left, Lauren gave me a long list of rules. No TV, no junk food, no leaving the house, and under no circumstances was I to answer the landline. It struck me as odd, but I figured they were just overprotective parents. Once they left, I tried to settle in. Mia was easy to handle. She played with her toys and went to bed without any fuss. But something about the house felt off. It was too quiet. Around 9 p.m., I noticed a strange sound coming from the baby monitor. It wasn't static, but a faint clicking noise. I checked on Mia, and she was sound asleep. I brushed it off and went back downstairs. Then the landline rang. I froze, remembering Lauren's rule. The ringing felt deafening in the silence. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I played back the message. It was Lauren's voice. "Is she watching, Peter? Do you think she's watching right now?" Then a pause, followed by a chilling laugh. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. My first thought was that they'd butt-dialed the house phone. But why would they say something like that? A few minutes later, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was too soon for them to be back. They said they'd be out until midnight. I peeked through the blinds and saw their car, but they weren't getting out. The headlights were off, but I could just make out their silhouettes sitting inside, watching the house. I tried calling Lauren's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. Suddenly, the baby monitor came to life again. This time it wasn't static or clicking, it was whispering. I grabbed Mia and locked us in the bathroom. I didn't know what else to do. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. "Why are you hiding? We're almost home." At that point, I called the police. When they arrived, the car was gone, and the parents were nowhere to be found. They called the couple's cell numbers, but neither answered. I left as soon as the police gave me the all clear. Lauren texted me the next day like nothing happened, apologizing for coming home late and thanking me for watching Mia. Needless to say, I blocked her number and never went back. I don't know what their deal was, but I can't shake the feeling they were testing me for something. I've babysat for some strange families before, but nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to the experience I had with the Hendersons. The mom, Claire, called me out of the blue, saying she got my number from a friend, though she wouldn't tell me who. They offered triple my rate for one night of babysitting. I was hesitant, but the money was too good to pass up. When I arrived, the first thing that struck me was how off the house felt. It was dimly lit, with heavy curtains covering every window. The walls were covered in mismatched family portraits, but they all had the same unsettling theme. The parents and their two kids staring directly at the camera with forced, toothy smiles. Claire and her husband, James, greeted me at the door. They were overly polite, almost robotic. Their kids, Lily, 6, and Max, 8, stood silently behind them, watching me with wide, unblinking eyes. Neither said a word as their parents explained the house rules. 1. Don't let the kids go outside. 2. Don't go into the basement. 3. Always keep the curtains closed. Something about their tone made me uneasy, but I nodded and agreed. As soon as the parents left, the kids started acting weird. Max sat on the couch, staring at me without blinking, while Lily hummed some eerie tune as she walked in circles around the living room. I tried making small talk, but they didn't respond. "Do you want to play a game?" I asked. Max finally spoke. "We don't play games." Lily giggled. "We watch." "Watch what?" I asked, forcing a smile. "You." I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "Okay, well, let's watch a movie then." They both shook their heads in unison. "No TV, just watching," Max said, his gaze unwavering. I decided to focus on my phone, hoping they'd get bored and leave me alone. That's when I noticed Max had moved closer, without me even hearing him. He was now sitting at the edge of the couch, just a few feet away, staring up at me. "Do you like being here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before I could answer, Lily spoke from behind me. "Mom and Dad think you're perfect." I jumped and turned around. She was holding a Polaroid camera, pointing it directly at me. The flash went off, and she giggled again. "Why did you take my picture?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because we need it," she said simply, skipping off toward the hallway. I followed her, demanding she give me the photo. When I reached the hallway, she was gone. The house was eerily quiet, and I suddenly noticed something I hadn't before. All the family portraits on the walls weren't just of the Hendersons. There were pictures of other people, strangers, posed in the same stiff, unnatural way, all with the same forced smiles. My stomach sank as I spotted a new blank frame on the wall with a label beneath it, "Babysitter." At that moment, the lights flickered, and I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned around to see Max and Lily standing together, each holding a Polaroid photo of me. "You should leave before they get home," Max said, his tone flat. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my bag, ran out the door, and never looked back. A few days later, I checked the local listings to see if they were hiring more babysitters. The Hendersons' house wasn't listed anywhere. In fact, it seemed like it didn't exist at all. I've been babysitting since I was 16, so I thought I'd seen it all. But this one night still haunts me. It started with an ad I found on a local job board. A couple needed an overnight babysitter for their infant. They offered $300 for one night, which seemed almost too good to be true. But I was desperate for cash, so I replied. The mom, Rebecca, called me right away. Her voice was soft, almost too soft, like she was afraid to speak up. She explained that their baby, Sam, was special. When I asked what she meant, she hesitated and said, "You'll see." Red flag, I know, but I figured it couldn't be that bad. When I arrived at the house, it was oddly quiet. Rebecca greeted me at the door, pale and frazzled, while her husband, Dan, stood silently behind her, staring at me like I'd done something wrong. "Sam's upstairs in the nursery," Rebecca said quickly. "He's a very good baby. Just keep an eye on him and don't pick him up unless you have to." I raised an eyebrow. What if he cries? Dan finally spoke, his voice low and gruff. Sam doesn't cry. That should have been my cue to leave, but $300 is $300. They left after giving me a short list of rules. 1. Don't let Sam out of the crib. 2. Keep the baby monitor on at all times. 3. Don't open the closet in the nursery. Weird, right? When I went upstairs to check on Sam, he was just lying there in his crib, wide awake. He didn't make a sound, not even when I leaned over to look at him. His eyes locked onto mine, and I swear they were too big for his tiny face, almost unnatural. "Hi, Sam," I whispered, trying to shake off the unease. He blinked slowly, never breaking eye contact. It was unnerving, but I told myself babies can be weird sometimes. The first hour was uneventful. I sat in the living room, scrolling on my phone, glancing at the baby monitor every so often. Sam hadn't moved, not once. Around 10 p.m., the monitor crackled. At first, I thought it was static, but then I heard a faint whisper. It wasn't coming from the living room. It was coming from Sam's nursery. My heart pounded as I grabbed the monitor and listened closely. The whispering continued, soft and rhythmic, like someone was singing a lullaby. I ran upstairs, convinced someone had broken in. But when I opened the door, the room was empty. Sam was still in his crib, staring at the ceiling. I checked the closet, even though I wasn't supposed to. It was locked. As I turned to leave, Sam smiled. That was the first time I felt true fear. Back downstairs, I tried calling Rebecca, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Dan's number, too. I decided to stick it out until morning, but things only got worse. Around midnight, the monitor went black for a second, then came back on. This time, Sam wasn't in the crib. Panicking, I sprinted upstairs, but when I opened the door, he was there, right where I'd left him. Except now, his tiny hand was pointing at the closet. The door was open. Inside, I saw something that still makes my skin crawl. A small rocking chair, creaking back and forth. Sitting on it was a tattered doll that looked exactly like Sam. Same oversized eyes, same blank stare. I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the house. The next day, I got a text from Rebecca. "Thank you for watching Sam. He really liked you. Would you like to come back next weekend?" I blocked the number and never babysat again. A few months ago, I saw a babysitting ad on social media. A single mom named Angela needed someone to watch her 3-year-old daughter, Bella, for the evening. She offered $400, which was more than I'd ever made in one night. The house was only a 15-minute drive from mine, so I figured it was perfect. Angela called me after I texted her, sounding genuinely sweet. She explained she had a work event and needed someone urgently. She apologized for the short notice but assured me Bella was easy to handle. When I arrived, the house was odd. It was in an empty cul-de-sac, with no lights on except for a dim lamp in the front window. The driveway was empty, but the door was slightly ajar. "Hello?" I called, stepping inside. The house was quiet, eerily so. There were no toys, no baby gates, no high chair, nothing to indicate a child lived there. I walked further in, my unease growing. "Angela," a man's voice answered. "She'll be down in a second. Make yourself comfortable." I froze. Angela hadn't mentioned a man living there. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I told myself I was overreacting. Just as I was about to walk back to the door, a woman appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked nothing like her profile picture. Her hair was stringy, her face pale, and her smile unnerving. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, her voice overly cheerful. "Bella's already asleep upstairs. Feel free to watch TV or grab a snack." Something about her felt wrong, but I nodded and sat on the couch, clutching my phone. About 20 minutes later, I heard the front door creak open. My heart sank. I hadn't heard anyone knock, and Angela hadn't said she was expecting anyone. I peered around the corner and saw 2 men standing just inside the door, whispering to each other. One of them noticed me and smiled, a slow, chilling smile that sent me bolting for the stairs. I ran into what I assumed was Bella's room, slamming the door behind me. There was no child, just an empty crib and a blanket thrown over a chair to make it look occupied. Panicking, I called 911 and told them I was in danger. As I waited for the operator to respond, I heard footsteps outside the door, followed by Angela's voice. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," she said. "We're not going to hurt you if you just come out." I grabbed the chair and braced it against the door, shaking. The operator stayed on the line with me as I told them the address, begging them to hurry. The men started banging on the door, and Angela kept talking, her voice sickly sweet. "You're making a big deal out of nothing, sweetheart. Just open the door." I heard sirens in the distance, and the banging stopped abruptly. Moments later, the house was silent. When the police arrived, the house was empty. No sign of Angela, the men, or even the furniture. It was like no one had ever lived there. I later learned the address was tied to multiple similar incidents. It was a setup, part of a trafficking ring targeting babysitters with fake job ads. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't called for help, but I haven't taken a babysitting job since. It's just not worth the risk. A few months ago, I got a last-minute babysitting gig for a couple I'd worked with once before. Their son, Oliver, was 6 and super easy to handle, just cartoons and mac and cheese, and he'd go to bed without a fuss. The pay was decent, and they were nice enough, so I didn't think twice about taking the job. They left around 7 p.m., reminding me to lock up after they were gone. The neighborhood was quiet, a cul-de-sac with barely any traffic. After dinner, Oliver and I were watching a kids' movie when he turned to me and said, "He's here again." I froze. "Who's here?" Oliver shrugged like it was no big deal. "The man who watches from the backyard." Chills ran down my spine, but I kept my voice calm. "What do you mean, Oliver? Is it a neighbor?" He shook his head. "No, he doesn't live here. He just stands there. Sometimes he waves." I told myself he was just being a kid with an overactive imagination. Still, I got up to check. I turned on the backyard light and looked out the sliding glass door. Nothing but darkness. "See?" I said, forcing a smile. "No one's there." Oliver frowned but didn't say anything else. Around 9 p.m., I put him to bed. As I was tucking him in, he whispered, "Don't leave the curtains open. He doesn't like it when you look at him." I closed the curtains in his room, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Once he was asleep, I went back downstairs. About an hour later, I heard a faint tapping sound. It was coming from the living room window. At first, I thought it was a branch or maybe an animal, but the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. I slowly turned my head toward the window, but the curtains were drawn. My heart was pounding as I approached, every step heavier than the last. I pulled the curtain back just a sliver and saw a man's face pressed against the glass. His eyes locked onto mine, and he smiled. I stumbled back, grabbing my phone to call the police. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. The man didn't move. He just kept staring, his smile never fading. As the dispatcher answered, I tried to explain what was happening, but before I could finish, I heard the sliding glass door in the kitchen rattle. He was trying to get in. I grabbed a knife from the counter and ran upstairs to Oliver's room, locking the door behind me. I told the dispatcher where I was and begged them to hurry. I could hear the glass door sliding open, the sound of footsteps on the tile floor. Then the footsteps stopped. I held my breath, clutching the knife, trying to stay quiet. Suddenly, Oliver sat up in bed and whispered, "He's inside now." Tears streamed down my face as I tried to keep him calm, shushing him softly. Then I heard it, heavy breathing right outside the bedroom door. The police arrived minutes later, though it felt like hours. They found the man hiding in the kitchen pantry, holding a crowbar. He'd been watching the house for weeks, waiting for the right moment. They never told me who he was or what he wanted, but I haven't babysat since. I still hear that tapping sound in my nightmares.